This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
He's Greg, I'm Nick. You know the deal. We are brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying baseball or even football tickets with the season rapidly approaching with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code we always give to you, CLNS, for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's hit some headlines, Greg, to start this thing off. Stephon Gilmore, still out there, still available. And he spoke with Josina Anderson recently. And really the sexiest comment he made is that there's not 64 cornerbacks that are better than him. When you look at Gilmore and the Patriots and their situation, could he be a fit in your eyes?
So we sort of talked about this before, and I haven't watched any film of Gilmore of late. I do remember watching him a few times last year, not only Patriots related, but also like Raiders related. So my opinion hasn't really changed. I think, and I hear from Patriots fans all the time on Twitter, they want Gilmore. They remember Stephon Gilmore, who was here, the defensive player of the year, Stephon Gilmore. And I understand that. And he's still a baller. And he's a guy that you want in the fight with you. Just in my opinion, and from talking to NFL personnel people, asking them about him, the opinion is nearly unanimous that he has lost a step, that he is no longer the man cover corner that he used to be. And that's sort of where, for me, Nick, the sort of breakdown about, him coming to the Patriots and like being an asset. Now, I'm not telling you if he came here, he wouldn't be a bad player. He'd be fine. But where the Patriots are in terms of their scheme, which I think is going to be even more man-to-man and man-to-man heavy with Gonzalez back, and Jonathan Jones can play man. They can all play man. It's one of the most man-dependent schemes in the country when they're going well and when they're healthy. I just don't see that as a fit for Gilmore anymore, a perfect fit. I think he's more of a zone corner now, which is weird because he used to be a much better man corner than he was a zone corner. That was some of his issues in Buffalo and early on here with the Patriots. So I just don't see him as a great fit. And the other thing about not fitting with the Patriots is, remember, these guys are now draft, develop. They want the kids to play. And so instead of bringing in a patchwork 30-something player at any position, not just cornerback, is that the right thing for this franchise that is building 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, where they're taking snaps from Isaiah Bolden, Alex Austin, Marcellus Dial, who they just drafted? Like, is that the best thing for the team long term? And I would say I don't completely rule it out, but I would just think that I tend to doubt that he would be a fit for those reasons.
Yeah, I know Giardi wrote recently and has said that. No, it wasn't Giardi. I think it was Andy Hart who said he wasn't necessarily bullish on this secondary. I think their secondary is pretty deep. I'm not telling you that they've got top-end talent all over the joint, but you've got Christian Gonzalez, and as long as he's healthy, I've got no issue with him. We'll talk about him in a minute. And I think, on the opposite side between Jonathan Jones, Alex Austin, Isaiah Bolden, you brought some of those names up. I think you're fine at outside corner too. Marcus Jones, obviously, it'd be nice if he stepped up and could play slot for you. And you got a number of safeties. Now, whether or not Dial can play safety in case you get into trouble and Duggar struggles again in the back end, or maybe Jalen Hawkins, who they brought in, had a lot of snaps at minicamp, he might be the answer. But I think they've got numbers in the secondary. And if Austin is able to be at least solid on the outside, you're set up really well, I think, for this year. And I would not be rushing to go out there and sign Stephon Gilmore, as much as I love Gilmore, and I do. Love the dude. I just think, like you said, they're in a different situation as a team in the middle of a rebuild. It would not be at the top of my list. Let's talk about Christian Gonzalez for a minute, Greg. I don't know if you saw this, but ESPN has their top 10 at each position, and Jeremy Fowler, he talks to scouts and executives, and there's votes and all of that. And surprisingly, I thought it was pretty surprising, Gonzalez finished with an honorable mention. Now, people might say honorable mention. Yeah, dude played 4 games last year. And he got honorable mention on this list, not just merely votes. And there was some pretty good football players that just get votes and not an honorable mention. So there was an AFC executive in there, Greg, in the story that called Gonzalez a stud and said he'd be higher if he played more games last year. Just kind of your reaction to that he's already being mentioned in the top 10 to 15 by a lot of people around the league after playing only like a month in his rookie season.
Yeah, I tell you the truth, I wasn't that surprised because I do think like he just kept getting better and better every game, and he was just coming into his own when he sustained the injury. I did see that. I looked through the series by Jeremy Fowler. You know, what I found interesting is, of course, you go through every position and you want to know where the Patriots are, especially the Patriots that got paid a lot. And, sort of, top 10 money. And so I'm just going off the top of my head. I didn't write it down, but I know Owenu, I think I want to say he was honorable mention because there was a blurb about him. Kyle Duggar, honorable mention, got a blurb. Christian Barmore got votes. Hunter Henry got votes. Matthew Judon got votes. So Devon Godchow, I don't think was anywhere on the list. Jabril Peppers got votes. I was immediately, you look at the guys like Owenu, Duggar, Ramondre Stevenson. I think he was honorable mention, I think. You look at how the Patriots paid them. They paid them as top 10 guys, and they aren't viewed there right now. But this just shows you that this is a big season for them to take the next step. They got paid. They got paid well. And some of it, especially when you're dealing with the offensive guys, it has to do with the offense itself and how crappy it was. And that kind of brings you down. But they need to take a step up. And they all need to be top 10 players the way they're getting paid and the way they're viewed across the league.
All right, let's jump to their former coach, Bill Belichick. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network reporting on Rich Eisen's show this week, Greg, that Belichick, quote unquote, intends to coach in 2025, and he's fully invested in doing it again in 2025. Just your reaction to that. There have been people saying that, maybe he'll stick with TV. I know Tom Curran kind of threw that out there. Is that even an option, or is this a full go Coach Belichick rearing to get back next season?
Yeah, I haven't talked to anybody in Belichick world recently. I think they're all off on vacation. But I would say, as of right now, I agree with Tom. I think he's intending to coach. I think he's full steam ahead with that. But I did hear Tom Curran's comments, and I thought they were interesting. And I don't rule that out, that Bill is doing all this media stuff, and maybe he likes it. And he also has that new relationship that we won't really talk about. I don't rule out that he enjoys life, and he's just like, why am I going to go back to that? And Tom made the point about the media. Why do I want to deal with these a-holes in Philadelphia? Jeff McClain and all those guys up my rear end, like Howard Eskin. I don't want to deal with all that stuff. So I'm just gonna stay in media where everyone's kissing my ass and telling me how good I am. And everyone already views me as the greatest head coach of all time anyways, because of all the Super Bowl rings I have. Do I really need 16 more victories to pass Don Shula to pass him in people's minds? Of course I don't. But at the basis, you just have to remember that William Steven Belichick is, I equate him to a great white shark where they only do a few things. They eat, they make little sharks, and that's about it. And all Bill Belichick knows is how to coach football and grind film and grumble at the media. And so that doesn't change. I mean, now that this is his 50th year in the NFL, like just, a few months of him enjoying himself, I don't think is going to change who he is at this stage in his life. And so, yeah, I think he intends to be back coaching. Whether or not anybody wants him and all that comes with that, we'll have to see.
He's a coach, man. He's a football coach through and through. And I just can't imagine him sitting back being that close to Shula and living the rest of his life thinking, Man, I was that close. I was one good season, 2 good seasons away from leapfrogging Shula. We know what Shula said back in the day with the Belichick stuff. I'm sure that's still a hair across Belichick's ass to a point. So I would be surprised if he's not trying to get back. All right. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, David Lombardi in The Athletic this week, writing about Brandon Aiyuk. He brought up 3 options, and one of the options was a trade. And he mentioned Joey Bosa. There's this idea that San Francisco is looking for a defensive edge player, pass rusher to put across from Nick Bosa. And I wanted to ask you, Greg, your thoughts on a possible deal. I'm just going to put this on the table for you, and I want your yes or no and why or why not. If you were the Patriots, would you trade Matthew Judon in a 2025 second-round pick for Brandon Aiyuk if that was something San Francisco would do?
Yes, I would. I would definitely do that. That allows me to keep my first round pick. It takes the Judon issue off my plate, and it makes me a better team. I'm fine with Keon White playing more. To me, there's nothing not to like about that. Of course, when we get in, so I agree with you. I mean, I like the deal. Of course, as we've talked about before, we can play fantasy football all we want and fantasy GM, which I love to do. But, are the San Francisco 49ers just on the precipice? And put yourself in Kyle Shanahan's shoes, how close he has been. And now he has a quarterback who's healthy that he thinks is the right trigger man. You're that close to a Super Bowl. And, are you going to trade off one of your most important pieces on offense because you don't really have a guy like that? Everything is primed for this year in the San Francisco 49ers. And do you hamstring yourself a little bit by dealing your best vertical outside threat?
All right, we'll take a break here.
It's the middle of the summer. It's hot. But you know what summer means to me? Baseball. I love going to the park. I love supporting the Old Town team. And when I want to go see my favorite team, Game Time is the perfect place to go. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying baseball tickets. I was just looking at the website, gametime.co. They also have the app, Game Time. I was looking, big event coming up, a New York team coming to Boston, red hot hometown team. I got to tell you, the prices are a bit pricey for the first game of the series, but guess what? On Game Time, they have these things called flash deals. So an outfield grandstand ticket that normally costs $152, it's $132, $20 off. That'll get you in the park. That'll get you a good view. Nobody in front of you, no poles in front of you. That's the kind of stuff you find when you go over to Game Time. You know what I also love about Game Time? Well, there's a few things, okay? I love seeing the view from your seat on my phone before you buy. That's a must. I won't buy tickets from any place unless it has that. Game Time has it. Also, the all-in pricing shows your total cost up front. You go to these other sites and you're like, oh, that's a good deal. Suddenly you get to the end and there's all these fees and taxes and other things, and all of a sudden you're paying double than what you thought. That does not happen at Game Time. So make sure you get over there. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, let's jump to the offensive line now, Greg. You had the opportunity to watch not 1, not 2, but 3 games from Chuks Okorafor last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We will do a deeper dive in a few minutes here, but just your initial 30,000-foot evaluation of Chuks in what you saw, generally speaking.
Yeah, so I guess my overview of Chuks would be ideal size. Guys like 6'6", 34-inch plus arms, smooth athlete, moves well. I would say I worry a bit about his strength. I worry about him against power. I also worry about him against top speed edge rushers on the outside a little bit because he's not the greatest athlete. Like his relative athletic score was not great when he came out and was a 3rd round pick. But I got to say this, Nick. You watch him and like you see him get pushed back against power, but like at the end of the day, the dude's pretty effective. Like it's not pretty and it's not classic and he's definitely not strong and he doesn't have a great punch and he's certainly not going to bowl anybody over in the run game unless they're like a corner or a small safety. You know, he lacks in the running game, but just as far as his effectiveness on what he's going to be asked to do and what offensive linemen, especially offensive tackles, are asked to do, which is basically like keep the guy in front of them away off the quarterback for enough time, I think he's going to be pretty effective for the Patriots. And I think he can be even better if Scott Peters and Robert Kugler can get him to play, develop his punch, get him to play a little angrier, get him to play a little bit more physical. And if they can do that, the Patriots could have a pretty good steal on their hands. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's going to be an All-Pro or a Pro Bowler or anything like that. But do I think he can hold down the fort without a ton of help at left tackle? Yeah, I do. I think he's going to be decent for this team from what I've seen.
Now, interestingly enough, he was benched after playing 2 of his best games, Greg.
Yeah.
What'd you make of that decision in that situation in Pittsburgh?
So, I was going through his PFF scores. And, that's basically where I start my film study. I want to see 2 of his worst games, and I want to see 2 of his best games. And so I haven't watched the 4th game, which would be a second quote-unquote bad game, I got to tell you. So I watched the Cleveland game, which in terms of his overall – I'm just going back to his grade. His overall offensive grade, week 2 against Cleveland, he had a 37.6. That was his lowest rated game of the season. Baltimore, which I still have to watch, week 5 was his second worst full game. He played 3 snaps against the Patriots and graded out poorly. I'm not gonna look at that because it's just 3 snaps. But then you look at it, and as he's going through the season, like he starts to play better. Now I watched the Rams game second. I watched the Browns game first, his worst one. Then I watched the Rams game in week 7. So it was week 2 to week 7. And the difference between the players was eye-opening. It wasn't quite night and day, but like he was a lot more physical against the Rams. Like I really liked what I saw against the Rams. And then he plays the next week against Jacksonville, which was his second highest rated game of the season. Now, I don't think it was great. He gave up a sack. He had a couple penalties in that game, but whatever. That's the PFF grade. Everyone knows how I feel about PFF grades with offensive linemen. I actually didn't think he was that bad against the Browns, and it was his lowest rated game. But then all of a sudden, he's on the bench for the rest of the season. He barely plays the rest of the season. So I Googled like Okorafor benched, and the story comes up that the reason he was benched, and Okorafor, who is very honest with the media, so that'll be nice. He said that he talked to Mike Tomlin, and Mike Tomlin told him he wasn't being benched for performance. It was because he overheard Chuks Okorafor late in the game against Jacksonville when they were down 20-10, sometime in the 4th quarter. Tomlin overheard Okorafor telling somebody that if we're going to run these plays, we might as well just take a knee for the rest of the game. Like, what the hell are we doing? So he was criticizing Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator, who, if anybody's listening to this podcast, like I've been all over that guy since before the Patriots played them a couple years ago. And I was like, this offense is terrible. It's a joke. And what's interesting is that Tomlin did what he did. And then 2 weeks later, he fired Matt Canada. So Okorafor got benched for telling the truth and being right. And so I was just like, okay. So, I mean, that's sort of the basis. Like, he didn't lose his job because of performance. He lost it because he, quote unquote, mouthed off a little bit. But, dude, he's a truth teller. Maybe we can get him to write at BSJ. Maybe he can give us the, maybe he can do a diary for us. Give us the truth. What's going on behind the scenes with Mayo? It
is funny. Like, a couple weeks later, Canada's gone. It's like, yeah, it's exactly what I was saying, Mike. This is why I was pissed during the game. I'm glad you finally realized it after way too long holding on to that guy. All right, I got 2 questions for Greg, but before I get to them, Game Time, $20 off your first purchase by using that code CLNS. Check them out. Download the Game Time app. Tremendous resource if you want to go to a game. Baseball, football's coming up. So again, Game Time. Check out that Game Time app. And also don't forget, Boston Sports Journal, $50 for the year. Giardi, Bedard doing great work with the Patriots, Corrales with the Celtics. You know the deal. $50 for the year. Incredible value. Check out bostonsportsjournal.com. All right. I'm going to start with the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario for Chuks Okorafor.
In my mind, the worst case scenario for Chuks is that he can't block power well enough, that he just gets overcome. Now, what you will see, Nick, when you watch him play is, like, for example, he didn't go against Myles Garrett very much in the Browns game. He did go against Zadarius Smith, who is similar to a Matthew Judon type of guy, maybe a little bit thicker than Judon. Yeah. I also saw him. He had a bit of a tougher time with Travon Walker of the Jaguars, the former, I don't know if he was number 1 or number 2. He was one of the top picks in that draft out of Georgia. Great athlete. What you see out of him, especially against these powerful guys, is he is going to give way like 3 or 4 yards, like when these guys get into him. Like, you know, when you think of a classic offensive tackle, you think of a Tyron Smith type of guy, Trent Williams, one of these guys who are long, big, strong, and they have a punch. They can't, they keep the guys at arm's length. Well, Okorafor doesn't do that. Like, it's either you thwart power or you absorb power. Yeah. And Chuks Okorafor is an absorber of power. So he is going to let guys get into his chest and move him back, but he is going to bow up at the last second, grip them, not let go. He's, like I said, long arms, big hands, 10+ inch hands. So he's really more of a guy, like, you will see him punch. It's not a very effective punch. If he develops a punch, he could be really good, but he's going to let him get in, and then he's just going to maul him. He's just going to tie him up. And he does a really good job of that. It's not pretty. It's not the way a lot of guys teach it, but it's effective. But if that fails him, and he can't continue to do that, and he gets a lot of holding penalties, and he gets a lot of illegal hands to the face, which you do see at times with him, it's going to be a runaway train to the quarterback. But from what I've seen on film, he does it for about the first 3 steps. You're like, oh shit, Okorafor is going to get pushed right back into Drake May or Jacoby Brissett, and they're going to get bullied. But at the last second, he holds up. Now, the other worst case scenario for me is him and City So next to each other can't run block worth a damn, and the Patriots can only run block to the right. Now, they're running a zone blocking scheme now, so really that should not be an issue. Like, they're not going to be running a lot of power runs like the Patriots used to do, or double team and go to the second level. It's going to be more like outside zone, inside zone. So, and he certainly has the athletic ability. He could get down the field. He could run a little bit. Again, he didn't test great in a lot of areas, but he's effective on the field. So my worries is that he gives up too much on power. And I just heard Greg Cosell, he was on with Ross Tucker, and both of them had just gone to the O-line masterminds camp. And I think it was Trent Williams who talked. And one of Greg Cosell's big takeaways from it was Trent Williams said, if you can't block speed, you can't play in the NFL. If you can't block power, you can't play in the NFL. Now, that's my worry about Okorafor, that he has trouble the more he plays, especially on the left side against better pass rushers, that he's going to have a tough time with power and he's going to be walked into the quarterback a lot. So that's sort of my worst case nightmare scenario.
All right, let's finish it up with your best case scenario.
That Scott Peters and Robert Kugler really do a good job of building up his fundamentals. Again, he's coming from a Steelers organization where we knew, because we talked about this with Adrian Clem, their line coaching for multiple years was kind of a crap show. And it was sort of like the Patriots' own situation with so many different offensive line coaches, offensive coordinators. You know, I'm willing to bet, and I think the Patriots are willing to bet, especially relative to what they're paying him, that he hasn't gotten the coaching yet. And I think that if he gets the coaching, and Peters is big on punching, physicality, Kugler's a good teacher, if they can develop his punch to go along with his smoothness, getting into the kick slide and all that stuff, and they ramp up his intensity a little bit in terms of, and I'm not saying he's a wimp. He's not. You will see him get after guys after the whistle at times. He'll drive guys to the ground. You just want to see it more consistently with him. So if they can get that consistency and develop his punch a little bit more, I think left tackle by the end of the season, we could be talking about, like, why were we so worried? Why did all those radio shows spend so much time yelling about left tackle and about how they haven't done anything when Okorafor ended up being just fine all year?
We'll see how it unfolds. That's Greg. I'm Nick. Everybody have a great weekend. Training camp next week. Can't wait for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk to you early on. Until then, be well.